Perfect. All right, so yes, I'm going to talk about footwear from different perspectives today, all related to sports. And just a bit of background about myself first, in case some of you don't know me. Um, I am, as Emma just said, a lecturer in sports rehabilitation at St. Mary's University. I also have a role as an honorary lecturer in sports and exercise medicine at Queen Mary University, where I, amongst other modules, teach on the Podiatric Sports Medicine course. And then I have an external lecturer role at University of Southern Denmark in football medicine. My research areas sort of cover three main topics, of which one of them is football boots. And funny enough, that's one of the sports I've selected for tonight and one of the footwears I'll be talking about. But I also do a lot of research within women's football and technology in football. I do this research with a lot of amazing collaborations, both within the sort of the teams and club world and from football perspective, from brands. And I should mention that I'm not financially dependent on any of the brands, and I've tried to mix and match brands on the images, so there's no bias in what I'm saying, steering towards one brand over the other. And yeah, finally, I'm a member of two expert panels, one from FIFA and one from UEFA, looking into sort of steering women's football research, and from sort of a fitness for football coaching education program, sort of working as a women's expert from that field. So let me start by talking about why footwear is that important. So in sports technology, we always talk about a holy trinity. So we talk about performance, safety, and experience. Performance, obviously, being, optimizing to perform optimally. So I've put in the Olympic slogan here, CTs, LTs, 40s. So faster, higher, stronger. So no matter what the performance measures are, obviously, with footwear, we want to optimize it. With safety, we want to minimize the risk of injuries at the same time. And then with experience, this is often neglected from an engineering perspective, but probably the most important element when looking into selling footwear. This is the perception of the person wearing it. So it's their feelings around the shoe. It could be things like comfort, discomfort, or actually, what do they think about the looks of the shoe? Do they find them they're aesthetically pleasing? Would they buy them? Are they the right color to fit the population they're targeting? Things like that. Now let's look into research and sports footwear, again, sort of taking that holy trinity into perspective. So from a performance element, we often measure things such as speed, distance, energy consumption, energy return, agility, success, like scoring, winning. And these are often done in isolation from the other elements, as like mixing and matching can be complicated from a research perspective. And from a safety element, we often look at epidemiology. However, that's time consuming and often very expensive when looking at footwear. And therefore, quite often we do it as indirect measures. So, for example, looking at loading of the forefoot and looking at how that is behaving in a footwear, because we know that there's a relationship between loading of the forefoot and risk of stress fractures. Then there's also the experience that I just mentioned, which we often analyze through surveys or user trials. And as I said before, this could be comfort, satisfaction, or feel. This is all subjective. However, it is very important for the overall understanding of the footwear. And what is really key is that balance between these elements, and especially the balance between performance and safety. So an example of this could be the outsole of the football boot. So we want the outsole of the football boot to optimize agility, so having a perfect traction with the surface to make sure that you can move, cut, change direction, so that there's a certain grip where the football boot will be stuck in the ground, and you can therefore change your movement pattern. However, it's a fine balance, and we want you to be able to sort of stick to the surface and change direction without that traction being too high, where you risk actually getting stuck in the surface and increasing your injury risk. So for many of these performance and safety measures, it's always that balance of how far we're willing to take the risk to optimize the performance for the athlete. Footwear is not like buying milk. Sounds a bit stupid, but what I mean by that is that when you go to the supermarket, you know what a skimmed, semi-skimmed, and a full-fat milk is. However, when you go into your sports store and you look into buying a running shoe, for example, the shoe has many different names. So here's the names that a systematic review revealed were used in research to define the different shoes assessed. And you can see from the list here that there's no sort of convention of how we define shoes, and there's no convention of what these shoes actually have to possess to be called a traditional, conventional, a modern day, a stability shoe, a motion control shoe, or cushion shoe, and so on. So having that idea of what a shoe actually is quite complicated, because one thing is what they call it, another thing is what it actually is. So what do we actually measure when we look at shoes? So another systematic review looked into the measurements conducted for different running shoes. And here we see the measures, so things like heel to toe drop, so how the shoes is raised at the heel compared to the toe, the minimalist index, midsole hardness elements, midsole thickness, stability element, cushioning, inner sole thickness, outsole wear, mass, and shoe age. And that's just the measures. Then we'll also look at the different materials that people can assess or have assessed, and the qualitative elements that I talked about before, such as comfort, selection choice, and also costs. So again, you know, it's a very complex thing to actually define what a shoe is. And the truth is that even within the same category of shoes, these shoes will vary on multiple elements. When designing things like a football boot, you don't just have to sort of consider the person wearing it and potentially the surface you're running on. It's more complex than that. So with a football boot, you have to think about the player wearing it. You also have to think about the opponent. So there's an element of safety and consideration of how the studs are designed when you go into tackles. You don't want them to be too sharp, too long, as we have cases and history of quite severe laceration injuries from especially bladed football boots in the past. So that's another element we consider. Of course, there's the surface, and I'll talk more about that later. And then there's the very much important element, which is the interaction with the ball. Again, you know, all these elements are considered from that holy trinity in terms of performance, safety, and experience. And of course, not to forget, which you often do when talking about shoes and making them the star, is that obviously there's an important element linked to it, and that's the person wearing them. And these people will vary in their demographics, their fitness level, the environment they run in, and the running style. All of these factors will impact which shoe is optimal for the individual. So just a quick mini conclusion before I move on. Just to like a recap, you know, we always have that sports tech holy trinity. I think it's important to mention that names are just names, and designs vary in more than one parameter always, and the same for humans, they will always vary in more than one parameter as well, making the shoe fit to the individual very complex. And now some examples from the real world, and I'm focusing predominantly on football and running today. So let's talk about the fit. So again, here we're talking very much about the experience of the person wearing the shoes. So I want you to stop for a second, just think about running shoes first. Do you own a pair of running shoes? Did you buy them based on your running style? Did you receive advice in the store to match the shoes to you? These are all quite common, so we tend to sort of buy the running shoes based on our running style, on the type of runner we are, and what fits us. So there will often be ways to sort of try them on in the store. Now let's apply this to football boots. So do you own a pair of football boots, or do you know someone who does? Maybe a son or a daughter. Did you buy them based on your running or movement style? And did you receive advice in the store to match the boots to you? I assume you probably didn't, and I'll talk a little bit more about this now. So running shoes in terms of marketing have traditionally sort of focused on control, protection, comfort, very much focusing on matching that running shoe to you and you as a person and how you run, to make it comfortable. And you can see the image. I really like the Nike advert in the bottom left corner, which is like a racing shoe should be easy to forget. So basically wearing something that's so comfortable that you don't even notice it. And as you know, there are many different ways of trying running shoes on in the store, from the, you know, the person working there just giving you that, you know, that thumb squeeze on the big toe to see if it's the right fit, to these magical equipments that some of the stores have to somehow measure your running style, which I'm quite critical about, but I don't have the time to go into depth about today. And then into sort of more kinematics and kinetics, sort of thorough assessments, and the way that I actually prefer to just, as some running stores allow, you know, to give you a month to go and try the shoe on to see if it's the right fit for you. Now, let's flip that around and look at the football boot marketing. Football boot marketing is very performance focused. So we have four main categories of football boots. There's the speed boot, which makes you faster, the touch control boot, which improves your dribbling and passing ability, the power boot, which improves your kicking, and then the heritage boot, which is like a relaunch of an older boot, often sort of targeting older players who remember these boots from back in the days. So a real difference. So instead of, as we saw before, the shoe fitting to you, the football boot is the shoe fitting to the dream you want to be. So you buy the football boot based on your position. Are you a player who's expected to be fast? Then you probably be a winger, a striker, and you buy a speed boot. You can, if you're more in need of agility as a center midfielder, you'd buy a football boot matching that. Most likely, for many younger footballers, they will buy whatever their idol is wearing. So again, fitting the shoe to a dream. If I wear this, I will play like Cristiano Ronaldo or whoever it might be. So everything is very much focused on that marketing and selling a dream. Now let's move on to different populations of and looking into the fit as well here. So the female player, well, what we know about female feet is that they're not just smaller than men's, they're different anatomical shapes compared to men. And this is a study done on 424 feet. I'm currently doing a systematic review with a couple of podiatrists, trying to sort of understand exactly how feet are different between males and females and within different ethnicities. But that's work in progress. So at the moment, we know so far that they're different. There's an advert here from Either Sports saying, you know, that we know that women have a shallower big toe, the inside line is more curved, the arch is higher, the foot is smaller for a given body height, and the outside length of the feet is shorter. So this is a problem, and why so? Well, because so far there's no, there's hardly any football boots available on the market today. And as you can see from the image below, that's me up working with the England women's team, trying to help them improve the issues they were currently facing with the footwear. So it's not just amongst amateurs, it's all the way up to the elite that we see a lot of issues with fit for female players. So what is available for females? Well, I said that there's hardly anything, and that's correct, because so far the only company selling actual women's football boots is Either Sport, which is a startup company from Australia designing football boots made for women. They've designed their first version and are working on the second version now, making them very unique in a very big field. And other than that, and what you normally see is that women will wear men's or more likely children's football boots. I've always found it quite intimidating that you as a female have to walk into the children's section to buy a pair of football boots that actually fit you. And truth is that the football boots in the children's section are often not of the same quality as the men's. This is changing, and I'm working with a few companies now to change and design women's football boots, and these are meant to be ready for the next Women's World Cup in 2023. So a bit of waiting time, but at least we are doing the research and trying to get things right the first time around. So sometimes patience is worth it. Then there's also the BME footballer. So as I said before, the systematic review that I'm doing is also focusing on different ethnicities. For this, I'm going to give you a little example and a little interesting story. So in this image, you see the feet of Michael Antonio. He had an agreement with a brand that I was working for my PhD, and had his feet, his shoes molded for him. When he came in and they asked him, he said he was a size 12 or 13, and when they then measured his shoe, he was a size 8. Truth was that he'd made it to play for England with basically what I would define as clown feet. They cut the end of the shoe open, and there were like a 5 or 6 centimeter gap between where his toes ended and the boot ended. But because of his white feet, which is a typical trait from like being a West African descendant, he basically could not fit the football boots on the market and needed special customized boots to play in. Then there's also the youth footballer, and as I said before, the football boots for children are generally just a smaller, cheaper version of the men's design. This causes some issues in especially the stiffness of the outsole, which is often very, very hard, and maybe as we hear about children later on, we might hear more about this. But another issue there is the actual flex point. So whilst it's assessed for the seniors, children often have odd flex points, which doesn't correspond with the bones in the foot and can cause stress on tissues within the feet and a lot of aching, if not injuries. So again, a quick summary. Marketing is not a fact. match your fit and your movement. Don't try and buy into a dream. And challenges are currently faced for BAME women and children in terms of many of the designs available on the market. Then just quickly, I'll go through that design, injury and performance balance and the issues we face here. So from a running shoe perspective, it's generally overuse injuries that we see, and it's there's a very clever comment from Laurent Malizot, who said that it's never the running shoe causing the injury. The shoes may alter the tolerated load, but it's never the shoe itself that's causing the injury. And when we look at this, it's very interesting, because from a systematic review, again, 63 studies were assessed in terms of whether or not running shoes can impact performance and injury. Of those, they found 4 potential impactors. However, the truth was that the quality of the research and the variability in the measures was so large that they wouldn't really strongly say that any shoe design is worse or better in terms of injury and performance. And then from an overload perspective in football, I've previously looked at how lightweight can or cannot make you faster. And the interesting thing here is how it may relate to the injury risk, because a lightweight boot has a thinner outsole, making it more comfortable and most likely increases your plantar pressure and hence the risk of stress fractures. This is especially important as a football boot increases the plantar pressure by just walking in it compared to a running shoe by 35%. And we found that certain shoes really do increase the stress, and by that actually decreases performance and make footballers slower in the last 20-30 minutes of the game. So a fast football boot can actually make you slower. I'm cautious of time, so I'm just going to skip through here and just show you this slide where and I don't think I can play the videos for you guys, unfortunately. But what you're seeing on here is from Athol Thompson's Twitter. So go and check it out yourselves. How people get injured when they change the surface, and that is really one of the key things. So with there we go. With football, when you suddenly change, you see there's a different surface on the outside here. You can see that the player actually sprains his ankle. Same again, sliding here because it's a different surface, and yes, also there. So with football, it's about traction and the football boots, so matching that outsole and the surface, which is very complex and not always fully understood. So mini conclusion again, balancing performance and injury risk as an art. Work on your demands, so match your footwear to the demands of the game, and optimal footwear is always relative. So here are some podcasts that you can listen to if you want more information about running shoes and football boots. And thank you very much. Just a few pictures, as I am Danish, sitting in Denmark and very excited for the game tomorrow. So just a little reminder and a little wish and hope that we will do well. And here's my email and my Twitter account, so if anyone wants to contact me, feel free to do so.
Katrine, thank you so much. Imagine rapturous applause, like as if you were at Wembley. You'll just have to imagine it tonight. That was so interesting. Just a gentle reminder to the listeners this evening, do please pop your questions into the chat and we'll try and take them as we go. We are a little bit short of time actually, so I've got just one very quick question for you. I'll just take from the chat if that's okay.
Sure.
So the question is, Is a gait scanner an important tool to assess the type of shoe? I would be starting with a yes, no, and giving us a very short answer to follow that.
Yeah, sorry, I know I ran a little bit over
No,
time, but I
so
always get
interesting.
excited when I talk about well, shoes in general. So, so a gait scanner, was that the?
Yes, is a gait scanner kind of helpful, useful as part of this process?
Well, I would always be careful. So it all depends. So with running shoes and footwear in general, it's we always adapt over time. So wearing something for a very short period of time and assuming that this is your running style or whatever walking style or whatever you might look into is challenging and probably simplifying things too much. My overall sort of best practice, as hopefully you got from this presentation, is wear it, try it on, and see if it works. There's no easy solution, even though there will be many people out there trying to sell it to you.
There are some eminent researchers, I think, who would agree strongly with that conclusion. So thank you once again, Katrine, a really fascinating talk.